Fun times had by all, really. So, the Major Axis Navies in January 1941. And yes, this is a continuation of the series. If you haven't already seen the Allied one from yesterday, you won't have heard me update you, but basically, we've done 1939 1940, now doing 1941 and 42, as of Wayne Boren's suggestion. And the criteria here include no foreknowledge, i.e., so I can't act in hindsight, and I'm doing my best not to. You can argue that sometimes I am arguing with hindsight, but to be honest, it tends to be personal preference and which arguments I'd have listened to at the time. Basically, it's a kind of like if I'd had my way and limited in funding, I would have upgraded Repulse rather than upgraded Royal Oak. It would have made more sense to me. If I had been the Germans, I would have focused on the Graf Zeppelin rather than Tirpitz. I can understand why they focused on Tirpitz. I just would have put more efforts into the Graf Zeppelin. I'd have also done some more things on the cruiser program. But now we're into 1941, January 1941, and this makes the world a slightly more interesting place. Japan is still not at war. Still not at war. And I still recommending going to read Rear Admiral Yoshi Harama's paper. It's the starting place I have used along with the various books I have on Japan to try and put together my ideas for what I think Japan should have been doing. And in January 1941, they pretty much know war is not only know war is coming, they know when it's coming. They know how soon it's coming. So they have got a countdown timer going. So there is a difference here to them than anyone else in this scenario. They have a countdown timer pretty much going. They know, give or take, it's going to be this year some point. Is their strong suspicion because they're the ones preparing to start the war. Yes, they're still finalizing plans, dates, etc., but it's coming soon. And that decision's already been taken. So the questions you have to ask about them are, they know their weaknesses. They are not stupid. The Japanese are opposite of stupid. The Japanese are incredibly capable. So why are they not prepared? That's when you have to ask yourself. Why are they not prepared? If they know this is all coming, if they know the threat that they are going to be opening up, if they know the war they are going to be starting, why are they not prepared? And really, it's the limit of their own infrastructure. It's the limit of their own industry. And that is their problem. The war they know is coming is being fought because they already think they're going to lose it. They think the odds are they will fight a war, they will lose it. But it's better to go down fighting, protecting their culture, and create, therefore, an honourable death for their culture, which will hopefully keep it alive through the loss, than to have themselves crushed by the might of America's economic bludgeon. So what would I do? Again, they had the debate over whether or not to make it public, to make it known that they have their super ship battleships. They have Yamato Musashi. I would still make them public. I would say, in nicest way, in 1941, it's even better. They were complete in 1940. They are knocking on the door for being actually commissioned. Do it. Make it public. So announce to the world, look at what we have. Look at these magnificent beasts. Gaze on them, ye mighty, and despair. Send shockwaves. Cause Congress to go into a panic attack and start going into unending investigations into how Japan has managed to complete these things without them knowing. If I can't win a war, I can avoid losing one. That sounds strange, doesn't it, right? So, let me explain. If you can't win a war by having a total war defeat on the enemy, what you need to do is build a war plan which plays for time, which is going to wear them down, which is going to grind down and sap their morale. Okay, if I'm going to do that, how do I do that at sea? I need to fight a version of the guerrilla war. The easiest things I need to build for that are submarines and aircraft and mines. And concrete. Lots of concrete. I need to have guns ready to go and concrete ready to be mixtures for concrete ready to be sent to be in almost in pre-packaged ships that land as soon as my troops land. So they start building fortifications as soon as they land to take places. I need to be able to refortify the Philippines. I need to refortify everywhere I'm planning on taking. I need to turn up, and almost the minute I've invaded, I need to have people start constructing the fortifications to defend them. I need to start working on that. I need to make it so that I can make you bleed for every inch of soil you take back. I need to make the war as long and grinding as physically possible. That is the only way I can win a war against America, is by not losing. By keeping the war going on, that in the end we have a negotiated peace. And that is a very different philosophy. Again, there are a few, very few Japanese officers who are writing about this. I've only found one English language source discussing it, and I don't really consider that the most reliable English language source, but I've got several friends who read the Japanese language sources who have told me that far more reliable sources in the Japanese language have discussed this. So that's why I'm putting in there. But this is what they're forming in 1941. They're forming up the Kido Butai. And again, if I know the carriers are going to be the strongest part and the core of my strategic reach, then I need fast carriers and I need large carriers and I need them yesterday. So I should be starting a conversion program to rapidly produce them, as rapidly as I can. Liners. Every ship I can get my hand on. My weakness is personnel, again, and generation of pilots. Now, I've got a lot of experienced pilots both in the Navy and the Army who have been fighting over China and have been launching operations. I need to structure a system whereby, at regular intervals, I take experienced pilots from squadrons and I take them back to training school, instructor schools, and I then, after they've done their time in instructor schools, they then go to newly formed squadrons to increase their experience, and so on. I need to start a policy of doing that now. And actually, to be fair, in the Japanese system, I have an advantage to do that. I have an NCO pilot force. Non-commissioned. That's brilliant. I can start using the thing of good NCOs, come back, go to do instructor roles, and after they've done instructor, while they're doing instructor, do an officer course, and then they go back to the new squadrons as officers. Italy. I love the Reggio Marina. 1940. 1940 is when Roma commissions. Well, it's launched and dated to. She commissions it in 1941. She is a beautiful ship. She's a very capable ship. Sorry, supposed to commission in 1941. Actually commissioned in 1942. As soon as I said it, I thought, I've got that confused, haven't I? But she is a beautiful, beautiful ship. And a very capable ship. But this is the problem for the Italians. They produce some of the best designs of the Axis force and one of the most balanced fleets. And until Japan enters the war, they are unquestionably the most balanced and most capable all-round fleet of the Axis forces. And let's be honest, the Germans carry out Operation Berlin. They plan Operation Rhine. Originally, as the idea is, I think the original plan for Operation Rhine was Bismarck, Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau would all go together. It's a lovely idea, but they never get that. Whereas for Reggio Marina, operating two battleships together is Tuesday. I've already talked about it, Cape Spartivento. But the trouble is for the Italian Navy is they have the same shortage of escorts which plague all the Axis navies. And this is made worse by the number of capital ships they have. Because the more and faster your capital ships are, and the more cruisers you want to operate, and the larger force you want to operate, the more escorts you need to protect them from submarines. And the thing is, if you use those escorts to protect against some of the capital ships and your cruisers against submarines, they're not protecting your convoys against submarines. And the Royal Navy are going out there hunting your submarines. So the weakness for Reggio Marina is as big and capable as it is. It's never big enough. It's never capable enough to do what its task it's found itself with. It was a navy built in many ways to dominate in peacetime the Mediterranean against all other powers other than the British. But saying that, the British haven't exactly been having the greatest war up until this point. The Kriegsmarine have been doing amazingly. Operation Rosenbang succeeded. Germany now has Norway. Wow! Operation Berlin, due to commence on the 22nd of January. That's when Scharnhorst and Gneisenau are going to go out for their time. Bismarck, commissioned in August 1940. Not yet available to go out, but it's getting there. Tirpitz, coming online in February 1941. And this is why they've got this original plans for Operation Rheinberg being drawn up. To sortie all four battleships together. It's amazing. And you just think about the battle we'd be talking about in the North Atlantic if all four battleships had sailed together. If it hadn't been the poor little cruiser going along with Bismarck, if it had been the four battleships of the German Navy had been out together. Imagine the fuel they'd have spent, but also imagine what the Royal Navy would have done. You probably wouldn't have ended up with a scenario of Bismarck and casing off against the Prince of Wales and Hood. No. You wouldn't have, because the Royal Navy would have been going around in packs of four as well. There would have been screams about Churchill's decision to curtail and slow down the construction of the fast battleships. I mean, it would have been an absolute abject horror show for Churchill in the House of Commons. His decisions on carriers and capital ships would have been ridiculed. As sensible as you may claim the battleship one was, I disagree on the carrier one decision, but the capital ship man makes sense at the time. Let's see, at this point, what's the Royal Navy lost? Royal Navy's lost Royal Oak. But it's still got other capital ships. 1941 will not be a good year for it. It'll lose Hood, Repulse, and Prince of Wales, and Barham. But it's not a bad. That's not happened yet. It's January 1941. Operation Berlin, we know is going to be a success. Scharnhorst and Gneisenau will go out and manage to get home. They all very nearly didn't. Let's be honest. If Rodney had managed a couple knots faster, then Gneisenau would have had a very early experience of what Bismarck would later experience. So what does this mean? This means the Kriegsmarine feels strong in January 1941. They are not seeing their own issues. Well, they are, but they're not as clear. Their big weakness is going to be organic air power. And deploying a capital ship is great. Deploying these surface raiders is brilliant. But if they can't find the convoys, then they are just going to be bobbing around in the Atlantic. And that's the whole point of convoys. They make them more difficult to find. Now, we talk about U-boat tactics and we talk about the wolf pack, but you also have to remember that there's a large number of boats usually deployed waiting to find the convoys, combined with condors and all sorts of things. They're not really available yet in January 1941. And they're certainly not at the level at which they're really communicating with the capital ships. They are slowly coming online, but they're not there. And this is why I go on about the Graf Zeppelin. So, this has caused a lot of discussion already. My points about the Graf Zeppelin. It is an absolutely terrible carrier design. Please note, at no point am I going to say it's a good carrier design. It really isn't. And the fact that the Italians end up adopting its catapult and hangar, etc. arrangement for the Aquila is beyond silly, especially when you've, by that point, got the Japanese operating in the Alliance. They're part of the Alliance. You can go and see what a proper carrier looks like, how it operates. You don't need to go with stupidity. You can go with a very sensible scenario. The only reason you don't go with the Japanese model is because you are racist. And unfortunately, fascists, by their very definition, tend to be so. So, hey-ho. That's on that. If I could correct that, I would. Actually, I wouldn't. Because that would make them actually have a chance of producing a decent carrier, which would cause a huge amount of trouble for the Allies and death. So, no, I wouldn't correct that. But in the process of this scenario, where I'm supposed to be providing fixes to their problems, this would have been a very useful ship for them to have. Purely as a reconnaissance asset. It is going to be so terrible at generating strikes. It is going to be nowhere near what you need for air defense. But the fact is, if it can put up any aircraft for air defense, that's going to be a problem for the British. Because how many carriers do the British have available? This is, again, the point. If the Germans manage to put to sea a fleet, which they have planned, if we go back, I'm not talking out of nowhere. They are planning for Operation Rheinberg, which is going to be taking place later in 1941. If you put enough effort, considering the existing design and details, you could have probably got Graf Zeppelin available for 1941, available for that operation. It might have delayed it in 1941 to later in the year, but you could have, if in January you've gone, right then, we want to do this operation and we need a carrier for it. And again, let's say the worst case scenario happens. It's Tirpitz, Bismarck, Scharnhorst, and Gneisenau together, all four of them, and a carrier. Okay, there are going to be people who are going to go, that's a British Royal Navy destroyer captain's dream. It possibly is, although they've got a lot of secondary guns and they're going to be firing them. But more importantly, What are the Royal Navy going to feel comfortable sending up against that group? They are not going to be thinking about sending up against that group anything but groups of 4 or more battleships with carrier. And again, that group can come out at any time it wants. The Royal Navy is going to have to maintain groups available to respond to it. So you're not talking about taking up 4 of the Royal Navy's capital ships. You're not talking about taking up 8. You're probably looking at 10 to 12 of the Royal Navy's capital ships having to be devoted to this task, which means you don't have capital ships for the Far East and probably don't even have them for the Mediterranean. You're talking 3 to 4 fleet carriers. Well, okay, at the beginning of World War II, the Royal Navy had Furious, which we could call a fleet carrier. I know Hermes and Eagle are sort of somewhere on there, and Argus, but they're not really fleet carriers. Courageous, Glorious, Ark Royal, and Illustrious coming into service. They've lost Courageous and Glorious. Victorious is sort of coming in. Furious is there. Formidable. Victorious is sort of coming around, sort of somewhere coming along there. But mainly it's Illustrious, Ark Royal, and Furious are what they have as proper worked up carriers. So basically, and that's before we have Crete or anything that happens in 1941. So basically, you have one carrier available, you will sap out the effective strength of the Royal Navy's fleet carrier force. Because the Royal Navy will be that scared. Because a carrier-guided 4 capital ship convoy, a task group going into the Atlantic, yes, supporting it fuel-wise will be a nightmare for the Germans. That's not the problem for the Royal Navy to worry about, though. The Royal Navy's mind, they already have seen the Germans manage to carry out fuel support for operations for the Graf Spee, and presumably had them in service for what is now the Lutzow, but originally was the Deutschland. Now they have control of Norway, and they have... Who knows what they can put out there now? It could slip out through Spanish territorial waters, because Spain aren't exactly pro-us. So, for the British, this would be the massive nightmare. For the Germans, this would be a very sensible thing, because it would tie down a huge amount of the British forces, which would stop them being able to be so effective in the Mediterranean. That would probably force them to abandon Greece and various other places a lot earlier, which might actually give them an advantage in the Mediterranean. An advantage in the Mediterranean could well give them an ability to get to the oil fields in the Middle East, which could help them strategically. All they have to do is reach Turkey and get Turkey on side to allow them across the Bosphorus Straits. And if the British don't have a fleet in the Mediterranean because they are so worried about having to have enough forces to face the combined capital ship and carrier might of the Germans, this works for them. So, that is not beyond the wit of the Germans to understand. At this point, there is people in Germany saying this. That's why they're building the Graf Zeppelin in the first place. Not because they particularly have a love for aircraft carriers. There are many in Germany who consider it a complete utter boondoggle, that it'll be destroyed by capital ships in 5 minutes. Look, it's got no armor, it's got huge fuel in there. Look, it's massively stab-sided. A battleship in seconds will demolish that. If you ever play World of Warships, you turn up, you shift to high explosive, boom, 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 it's gone. Well, believe it or not, that's fairly realistic for what would happen if a capital ship catches a carrier on its own. Which is one of the reasons why, as fun as games like that are, they are not really that realistic, because in the realistic world, that carrier ain't going around alone anywhere. And that's the other thing for the British. You'd be talking about having to deploy forces equivalent to what they have to fight the Battle of Cape Matapan. That is the level of task group they'll be deploying everywhere. That would be a huge drain on resources. And also, remember, it's not just the capital ships. It's also the escorts, because the British do have enough destroyers and will want to do it properly. And they will be worried about submarines because they've already lost Royal Oak to a submarine in Scapa Flow. One ship. Completing one ship doesn't have to be that effective in reality. It just has to be completed and you be able to talk about it for it to be a danger. And if you want more proof about how much of a danger these things are, think about how much effort the RAF put into bombing Aquila when the British heard it was as far along in the process it was. The British would do the same with the Graf Zeppelin. But that's at a time in the period in the war where the British do not have as many heavy bombers, and their capabilities of heavy bombers are nowhere near what they will become. The Germans, if they'd pushed this in January 1941, if they'd really put some effort into it, could have got there. They are building up the submarine program again. The other thing I would do is take ship production as far away from Goring and the office of the 5-year plan as physically possible, but that's politics. So what we've got coming up? Well, the rest of the week are more of these. We have Lives coming up. Science fiction strikes again. Then the Selborne Fission Scheme. And then it won't be on the 2nd of September now. It will probably change. It could well be on the 1st of September. I'm going to move the day around on that one because, well, it can't be on the Saturday. The Friday night now, I'm going to be talking on Armchair Admirals. So probably I'll put it to the 1st of September. 5 Ways to Fix the Fleets of World War II. It'll be fun. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.